why the Democratic Party can never be reformed. And I can't wait till you see the Bad Faith interview, because sort of this points come up about why can't the Democratic Party be reformed. Um, Things get a little heated when we're talking about the professional managerial class and David Sirota in particular. So that is going to be a great interview. It's supposed to drop on Thursday, so make sure you check it out. Me, Sabby, and Nick, the three of us, with Brianna Joy Gray on the Bad Faith podcast. And then we should have a discussion on Thursday. So Thursday night is going to be fire, or Thursday's going to be fire, because we're going to have the interview. Then, of course, Nick and I are going to have to cover the interview at some point on Thursday. And then later that night, Brianna's call-in show, we're going to be joining her to talk about all of that. So Thursday, you do not want to miss the dropping that bad faith podcast. So what I like about Brianna is that she's not afraid, and it could be because she's Black. She grew up. Her mom is in the working class, so she it's kind of Black subculture, where it's not taking offense when you're arguing passionately and talking loudly. It's not an offensive thing, and she doesn't take it. And I'm glad she doesn't, because we things get heated at some certain points, especially on our call-in. If you listen on her call-in show when I've been on there, and I was like telling her, man, I'm sorry. It seems like we're every time I come on the show, you and I are getting into a short little passionate discussion. So let's go with this article here. Now, this article is an older article, but we need to reread it and re-examine it, because it's of course it's still ringing true even today. The Democratic Party ranks alongside the Tories in England as the oldest capitalist political party in the world. This decade, it will enter into its third century of existence, carrying behind it a record of great social crime. And I love the analogy it gives here, sort of the analogistic storytelling it gives right here. In its infancy, this was the party of Andrew Jackson and Indian removal. In its childhood, it fought a war for the expansion and then defense of slavery. In young adulthood was the violent suppression of the working class in the aftermath of the Civil War, and a humanitarian cover for American imperialists' bloody appearance on the world stage. Entering maturity in the 20th century, the Democratic Party took the United States into two world wars, dropped two nuclear bombs, and waged neo-colonial wars in Korea and Vietnam. That is a mouthful, but I love the beautiful way it's told in a growing up, your infancy, then your childhood, then your young adulthood, then your adulthood, and now you're maturing. This is the story of the United States. The stories that they claim, CRT, don't mention these stories. We don't want white kids feeling bad about themselves. So I want to read this again and kind of take each one. In its infancy, in the beginning, this was the party of Andrew Jackson and Indian removal. The Democratic Party cannot be reformed. This is a party of 200 years of the same type of imperialist, destructive, suppressive, oppressive behavior. So for people like David Sirota want to make it seem like we could change this. It's in their DNA. Can you change anybody's DNA? In its infancy, this was the party of Andrew Jackson and Indian removal. Now let's move on. In its childhood, I always have to make sure I pronounce that D. It fought a war for expansion. It fought a war to expand. The Democratic Party fought a war to expand and the defense of slavery. The Democratic Party, its young adulthood was the violent suppression of workers class of the working class in the aftermath of civil war and the humanitarian cover for American imperialism bloody appearance on the world stage. So they suppressed all of that as a young adult. And now we're entering the maturity, the 20th century. The Democratic Party took the United States to two wars. The Democratic Party dropped two nuclear bombs and waged neocolonial wars in Korea and Vietnam. In the 21st century, it replaced social reform with identity politics, bailed out the banks, and destroyed large swaths of the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia. And we have the audacity to claim we're a Christian nation. Or maybe that's what Christianity does. Because you can have these stories about Christians and Christianity throughout history. Of people who claim to be about peace, claim to be about living a life as Jesus did. Jesus would be crucified by the Democratic Party if he was alive today. So let's continue with the article here, because to me it covers and I'm glad it brings back. It feels like a new story, even though I read it before. It's been that long. In 2021, the DSA still argued that socialism can only come from within this capitalist party, Democratic Socialists of America. They say elect good Democrats, place good people in the cogs of this party's machinery, and all will be well. Apply enough pressure, and after 200 years, the Democrats will finally see the divine light. Does that even sound believable to anybody? But that's what we're being sold. And this is what part of the heated interaction Bree and I had. It's sort of on this point. Elect good Democrats, place good people in the cogs of this machinery, of the imperialist machinery, and all will be well. Somehow that's going to fix things. Somehow this terrible party of 200-year history, Nina Turner's going to fix that shit. Marianne Williamson's going to fix that. Even Bernie Sanders is going to fix that. It is absurd. It is absurd. The idea is absurd. Let's read a little more because it's going to bring in David Sirota, I believe, and Jacobin. So let's do it. Or let's continue. I was just having flashbacks of what I was saying to Bree in that interview. Yeah. Jacobin, DSA, they're not going to like me. Not that they like me anyway. So let's continue. Anyone who still believes this myth should read Amy Parnes and Jonathan Allen's recent account of the 2020 election entitled Lucky: How Joe Biden Barely Won the Presidency. Lucky shows how the ruling class through the Democratic Party brings to bear 200 plus years of experience to accomplish its chief task, crushing left wing opposition and ensuring that the interests of the working people have no impact whatsoever on state, foreign, or domestic policy. That's the Democratic Party that David Sirota is saying we can change, that he's been working on for several decades. And I forget the guy, Zogby, the guy who was just on Bad Faith that Bree was interviewing when he was talking about the dark money, how they refuse. I think he's on the committee, but how they refused to even take up a vote for dark money. And he was saying, "Oh, next time we're going to be prepared." And she was trying to get him to say, "Well, we need more than that." He just buying it. No, we just got to keep supporting. We can't walk away. We're walking away. We've walked away from the Democratic Party. The book is based on interviews with staff for the major Democratic primary campaign. So pop a handful of anti-nausea pills and take a peek behind the curtain. What makes Lucky remarkable is that its revealing character is entirely unintentional. Barnes and Allen are so complacent, unoriginal, and so deeply embedded in the malign of the Democratic Party politics that they fail to realize that their attempt to hagiograph is actually a devastating exposure. So I'm going to read the next couple of paragraphs and then we'll pause. So Barnes and Allen uncritically describe a party comprised of people who treat the coronavirus pandemic and the mass suffering it has unleashed with near total indifference. The authors quote Obama Biden confidant Anita Dunn, explaining that she told one associate that campaign officials believe but would never say in public about the disease effects on Biden's fortunes. COVID is the best thing that has ever happened to him. That's Anita Dunn. Sounds like something she would say. Similarly, the police killing of George Floyd is significant only in terms of its immediate impact on the campaign. And the same thing with Roe v. Wade. What did they say immediately after? Go vote. That's how you protect your right. Go vote. Police killings and violent protests drove a clear wedge between young black voters and the swing state whites, the author remarked. These are hyper pragmatists, uninterested in and incapable of looking past the end of the news cycle. It is taken for granted that nobody has any political principles whatsoever and that everyone will say anything to get elected. The only constant is the visceral hostility to socialism or anything that resemble left-wing politics, and that is such a great one-sentence description that describes what the Democratic Party is about. The only constant about the Democratic Party is their visceral hostility towards socialism and anything that resembles left-wing politics. Tell me that doesn't sum up the Democratic Party. So I'll go to your comments and then kind of sum it up here. I don't want to go too long after 2 hours, and we just hit 2 hours. So I'll go to a couple of comments. But what say all of you about why can't the Democratic Party This article is saying the Democratic Party has a 200-year history. The Democratic Party, along with the Tories, is the oldest capitalist political party in existence. But David Sirota and left media, a lot of white left reformist professional managerial class want to get us to believe that's the best way to go. Crystal Ball in the interview with on Bad Faith podcast just recently. All of what's going on, this is the best avenue. And this is what I said on Bad Faith podcast. The framing of the Green Party and the third party is so not the framing. We're allowing electoralists to frame the argument. It's, well, if there was a third party that was viable, you're comparing a 200-year-old party and their entrenched capital to a party that we're trying to upstart. So acting like they're going to have a presidential candidate it's just made up. You have to begin at the local level, but you have to disengage from red and blue first. You can't be in red and blue and also try to build up green. That you can't do both. But stop allowing the framing of this third party that we're supposed to have somebody that can win now in 4 years, in 2 years, this 2 to 4 year cycle of electoralism. Be like, no, push back on that. No. The Democratic Party had 200 years to get to this place. How about you give the Green Party 25 years? What's the difference in David Sirota spending 20 to 30 years, because he says this, his whole life, decades, trying to flip the Democratic Party? What could have been accomplished by you spending those same 20 to 30 years working on building up the Green Party? You see the unseriousness of the argument? So, yeah. Kyle, I literally saw that as dyslexia. I thought it was going to say Crystal Kalinsky. But that's a whole nother story, that whole relationship. I mean, like, why do we need to know that? Like, what's the purpose of us knowing that? Like, nobody follows you in your private life. I never seen an article about your private life. So if you were dating him, we literally wouldn't have known. You're not going to be on camera lovey-dovey with him. Like, that is a complete unnecessary detail. It's almost like they want you to invest in personalities. You see how Breaking Points is the same thing as corporate media? They want you to invest in personalities, irregardless of the crap that they're spewing. The war propaganda. Them telling us about their relationship and engagement and doing in video. They want you to invest in personalities, the storyline, the narrative, and not the substance. Love the community here. Yeah. Okay, so let's get back to the story at hand. I don't want to read. I'm trying to get. Okay, here we go. This is the part I want to get to. The authors of that article, we were talking about the Pelly article, the article cites profound Democratic concerns over polls showing a majority of Iowa primary voters supported socialist policies. This became the fixation of the party. Now, this is the part I wanted to get to. Contrary to the strategy of the DSA, the more pressure from below, the more resolute the party became in efforts to crush the threat of socialism. Herein lies a fundamental lesson of Democratic Party politics. Pars, I'm assuming it's Barnes, but with a P. So Parnes and Allen write that the Democratic Party was actively considering supporting Trump if Sanders won the nomination. Many party leaders, they write, remember the Lincoln Project? How they were going to vote for Trump if Bernie? Remember, many people on MSNBC was allowed. This thought was allowed. Just amazing. Many party leaders, they wrote or they write, weren't sure what they would do if it came down to Trump and Sanders in a general election. Founded nor not, their fears are losing their party to socialism competed with their fears of Trump winning a second term. Listen to that. Their fears of losing their party to socialism. This is for the progressive Democrats to listen to. When we're talking about dark money, when we're talking about why the Democratic Party cannot be reformed, this sums it up right here. Their fears of losing their party to socialism competed with their fears of Trump winning a second term. You know, the Trump that's going to end our democracy as we know it? Ending our democracy as we know it and letting socialism take over, they're going, this is a hard decision. And we think, progressive Democrats think, we're going to take over the Democratic Party. Like that, they can be reformed. It's really silly. It's really silly to even think about.